Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on PSN Radio. Hope everybody's doing great out there. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I will be live each Friday here at PSN Radio at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so be sure to tune in. And we will be opening the phone lines in hour two. So if you'd like to call in and ask a question, you can do so at 786-245-8127. That's 786-245-8127. And my special guest this evening is Dan Willis. And Dan's an awesome guest. He's been on my show before. Dan Willis is one of the Disclosure Project's top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of every major media, a world disclosure event which was asking for a congressional hearing in order to bring forth the witnesses and the witness scientists within the black projects who can release the technologies that have been hidden for over 60 years that could stop further damage to our planet. But instead, the message was sanitized by a controlled mainstream media. From his personal firsthand experiences and looking into the historical indicators that have been purposely omitted from our education system that reveals the infiltration of unwarranted influences operating behind the secrecy established for our national security system. An ex-radio broadcast engineer and ABC newsman, Dan has taken a keen interest in how the media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on the hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. And his website is thewebmatrix.net. And please welcome Dan to the show this evening. Hi there, Dan.
Oh, it's so good to be on the show with you. That's why we do the shows, don't we?
Yes, indeed. It's great to hear your voice, and it's always wonderful to have you on. So how you been?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. Just doing a little extra research, for my own education. As I keep researching more, I keep finding out how much I don't know, And then back when I went to Washington, to testify, I had no idea of all the things that have been hidden in history.
Right. Yeah, the more you know, the more you uncover, the worse it gets, huh?
Well, the more it connects and makes sense. And I guess the more people become aware, the more chance that it can transform to the best it can get.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know you were talking about, we were touching base off air a little bit about underground bases and some of the other things you might want to bring up to the listeners tonight. Anything in any direction you really want to start with?
Well, it's interesting. My testimony, when way back in, it was like 14, 15 years ago, when I went to Washington to testify along with 20 other witnesses that were, bases on the other side of the moon, 57 different species, nukes being shut down, and NASA airbrushing the UFOs, the usual stuff. And that we have the solution to get off of oil and nuclear for over 60 years. Just common stuff, on the mainstream media that gets effectively sanitized out of CNN, with the 22 cameras in the back row. My testimony was nothing compared to what they were doing. My testimony was I had a high level, security clearance, was taking messages from the ships at sea. And one of the ships were reporting I assume that is an extraterrestrial craft. What the crew was witnessing coming off of Port Bow was about 70 feet in diameter, a glowing reddish-orange elliptical object, as they described it, merged out of the ocean and then shot straight up into space. This was off the coast of Alaska. And the ship's radar operator tracked it going over 7,000 miles per hour. This was a secret and priority level going to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. So, the Navy's very aware of these things. In fact, I was looking at the reports from the Soviet naval intelligence who, they're much more, the Soviets are much more, the United States is probably the worst in the world to keeping this stuff under the wraps. So the other countries are much more forthcoming with it. And the Soviets noted that more than half of the UFO sightings that appear are going in and coming out of the oceans. It would make sense that, there's much leaked information and witnesses that there is underground bases. Even back in 1943, when the Nazis were aware that, the Allies were sneaking up on them and the aerial reconnaissance would start bombing them, they did huge operations of underground facilities in which they used concentration camp laborers, which I think about 320,000 of them died, under the conditions, putting together the V2 rockets and the different projects that they had. But they had massive underground facilities. Mm-hmm. And, Colonel Wendell Stevens, he was, involved with Wright-Patterson Air Force, which was originally, before the mid-50s, where all the extraterrestrial retrieval cases were being brought to, and then they took it over to Area 51. But he saw classified documentation that over in Germany, when at the end of the war, that's why they started Project Paperclip, there was at least 9 disk factories. The Nazis have figured out anti-gravity and were building ships, and there was 9 factories, and 8 of them were relocated according to the classified documentation. One to the underground base in Antarctica called Base 211. One in the Amazon. He didn't specify where it was, Brazil or the Amazon goes out into other countries. I'm assuming it was probably referencing to Brazil, and the other one was off in Norway. You have to wonder. It would make sense if you wanted to keep operations that were out of sight from the people on the land. It would make sense to do operations where your flying discs or whatever would be coming in and out of some remote place in the ocean. The last thing that could happen is, a ship just happened to be in the area, like the one that sent the message to me in code, and it just happened to capture it, Right. So, if you look at the reports on, Mutual UFO Network and the other one, there's like, something like, and this is the number of people that report, something like 16,000 reports of people, seeing craft that's from the land all over the place. You can imagine if the Soviet intelligence saying more than half of them are coming in and out of the oceans. And then, you have all the leak reports about the underground bases that they have extensive, and also under the ocean.
Right.
So, it makes you wonder.
Right. Well, and also when I think about the underground bases, insofar as even bases underwater, to me what comes to mind is a Stargate underneath the water where they can actually go into the ocean but go out through space. I don't know if that comes to mind with you, like a Stargate of some kind.
Well, the technology that they have, they go in and out of mountains. They can go. When I was in Washington, I met with Jaime Maussan, and he invited me down to Mexico. And he had a video of these Swedish scientists that were recording this volcano that was outside of Mexico City. The thing was just about ready to erupt. They had all the instruments there, and the needles were going up, and they got the whole thing on camera. A UFO came out of the sky very clearly, goes down into the volcano. So you can imagine the technology that creates a kind of like a protective bubble, I guess, around the craft because of the magnetic field. Mm-hmm. It went down there. All the instruments all settled down, and then the UFO comes out of the volcano and shoots off in the direction it came in at. So, the technology to, they can shift dimensions. They can go through solid material, and so it seems like they could just shift frequencies and go into an underground base. And it's kind of interesting that the German Prime Minister, not Putin, but Dmitry, I think his name is. He was interviewing this lady, asked him about the extraterrestrials, and he said, well, yeah, the presidents, when they take office, they're given this secret attaché case, which has all the nuclear codes and also shows where all the alien bases are and where they're interacting with us. It's like this interesting statement that he made that kind of implies that there's joint possibly joint military and extraterrestrial operations. And you just have to wonder. 1969. One of the witnesses that joined me, Mark McCandish, his colleague Bragg Sorensen, back in 1989. There was a big display for the top brass at Norton Air Force Base where they were showing these alien reproduction vehicles, and these vehicles were like. One was like 100 and some feet, 120 feet in diameter. The other one was like 70 feet, another one. And this stuff was made back in the 1950s, and the whole thing was hovering off the ground. When I was in Washington, I sat down with him at the Hilton Bar, and he knew I had a technical background and went over the whole operation of, he had the technical drawings that he brought with him to the National Press Club and showed how this craft operated, and it used a mercury plasma in the center tube with a Tesla configuration around it that it could cancel the mass and go faster than the speed of light. And this was stuff that was, and you could see on the technology, it was like 1950s. So apparently they figured out the equation, like Ben Rich hinted at back in 93, so they don't need to take a lifetime to go someplace. They can take ET home. So they have, you can imagine with trillions of dollars in these underground facilities and all this unacknowledged funding that comes in from different sources, such as drugs and whatnot. I mean, it's huge with some of the best minds in the world. What they have done since, since the 1950s to now. I mean, the technology would look like extraterrestrial to the common surface dweller on this planet.
Exactly. What comes to mind is obviously kind of like, we've talked about breakaway societies. I know many people have talked about the breakaway. So it sounds to me like it's possible that they have broken away. And by the time they come back for, say, a visit, they'll look like extraterrestrials to the regular people here on the illusion of the planet, right? So
exactly.
Something to think about when you think about the tall grays, or you think about anything that people have been encountering. Even Billy Meyer, who says he's talked to these, quote unquote, Pleiadians. I suspect they're actually mind controlled Germans who were part of the underground, and actually maybe possibly engineered to some degree. So with reverse engineered technology.
Well, it's interesting. Alan Dulles, who was heavily involved from everything from MK Ultra to Operation Mockingbird to bringing the Nazis into the CIA. I mean, he was, without him, a whole lot of, and also assisting Hitler escape, by the way. All of this was, it's like back in the 50s, what Alan Dulles was doing was running around to scientists that were trying to discredit George Adamski. And George Adamski, it's kind of interesting because he met with these, these tall, blonde Venetians, from the planet Venus, right? Mm-hmm. And what they were trying to do, according to a briefing that Ronald Reagan received from William Casey, the CIA director, that they were trying to see how easily the Americans could be fooled. Because you look at the pictures that Adamski took, and it's exactly what the Third Reich saucers looked like back in the 40s. Mm-hmm. So I think that the psyops, even some of the, I got a whole bunch of documents from the CIA back in the early 90s and made a CD out of them. It took me forever to scan them all and put them up on the web. But, some of the documents like Wendell, General Beetle Smith, he was in the Bilderberg meetings, and also I think he was the fourth CIA director. He was talking about the psychological warfare elements that could be used with this, because it seems that there's been a war going on for our perception, right, ever since the end of World War II, when the Nazis had a fallback plan called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare, to control the education, the media, and the entertainment industry as well, which they've done. They've effectively, that was quite apparent to me after I went to Washington. Was on 22 cameras on all the major media. Then CBS wanted to do an interview with me, and I said, I'm not doing this interview unless I could say we have these scientists that are willing to come forth and prove that we have a solution to get off of oil and nuclear and coal. And they promised up and down, and I became very aware when the producer was almost in tears. He said, I know I promised, but the higher executives, which are CIA, we now know, made it cut that part out. A solution to solve the world's energy problems, to stop situations like Fukushima, which is going out of control, to stop Gulf oil spills, the pollution that coal causes, all these horrible things that are done to this beautiful planet. A solution to that, the higher executives who want that cut off, that to me spoke volumes.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we've talked about how the patents have always been stolen and confiscated in the past, of course. And anybody who has any ideas, even Tesla, even the original technology with Tesla, we would have had free energy by now had we just followed his information in alignment with what he was really planning, which was really about free energy and none of this other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing about Tesla. I was, it's hard to validate all this stuff. I try to research as much as possible and try to get credible sources or documents. But, a lot of this stuff, it's hard to get official documentation on. But there's indicators that General Reinhard Gehlen, who was head of Nazi intelligence, which Allen Dulles brought into the CIA with thousands of Nazi spies, met with Tesla in 1943 when he died, and they tricked him. He got a lot of information. And that Otto Skorsky, which was the main bodyguard, SS commando for Hitler, that they suffocated him with a pillow, and they robbed his safe and delivered all of Tesla's papers to Hitler. I don't know if that story is true or not, but what I like to base everything I believe on is the 500 and some witness testimonies and official documentation that has collaborated with all these witness testimonies, because you can't fake that. You got generals, admirals, astronauts. You have people who don't even know each other with totally collaborating. I mean, that would be even more strange if that was unreal than it being real.
What's really amazing to me, Dan, is there they are. They show up and they testify, and nothing gets done, nothing gets resolved, nothing gets really opened up. I mean, what did they do? Just listen to everything and just ignore it?
Well, it's interesting. The place was packed. It was like one of the largest events of the National Press Club. The place was packed with all the reporters, UPI, AP, all the cameras in the back row. At the end of the conference, everybody stood up and cheered. They thought, wow, this is like a world-changing event. When I was at the Hilton, Larry Warren, one of our witnesses that was involved with the Brentwaters incident that happened over in the UK, where the UFO came down and actually shut off the nuclear weapons that they weren't supposed to have over there. He was saying they're picketing out in front of Parliament. He's from Liverpool, with signs saying, expose the secret government, release the extraterrestrial technology. They're picketing out there in front of Parliament. Nothing like that was happening in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. Right. Isn't that interesting where the world has gone since then? I mean, we've accelerated in the black technology field for sure, and still people are being contacted. There's contactees. There's what we call the me labs or my labs, however you want to say it. We have all sorts of things happening behind the scenes and in between the spaces. So you can't deny it. All this anomalous activity that's going on, it's right here in our faces. But what I've noticed, too, we have an agenda now globally which is creating a lot of strife and conflict, which is almost kind of like misdirecting people's energies to focus on the drama opposed to what's really happening on the bigger scale of things with the black technology.
Oh, they knew that from the very beginning of this all stems back to Sigmund Freud and Edward Bernays and Tavistock tied in with the CIA and MI6, and the whole thing is all a matter of they understood that they needed to have full spectrum dominance over the population's interpretive and decision-making abilities, and including the all-important, I'm kind of quoting from what General Wild Bill Donovan, who was head of the OSS, working in concert with Allen Dulles to lie to Truman about the estimates in order to keep funding all this money into the CIA, lying about what's going on with the Soviets. Anyway, he was saying, to have this matrix of perception with the all-important application of terror. They found that when people are afraid, that they're more easily controllable, by government authority.
Right. Yeah. Keeps them busy and distracted and controlled. Yeah, you're right about that. I was going to ask you, it kind of, it doesn't really I guess it's not relevant, but I wanted to know about the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds. Do you think that was a psyop? That was a preparation to just screw with people's brains when it was originally communicated back then?
Well, it's interesting, let's see, CIA Director William Casey, Knight of Malta. It's also interesting to notice the associations with secret societies and Freemasons and whatnot. He was telling Reagan that ever since 1951, Operation Dove controlled all of the entertainment, anything having to do with extraterrestrials, and War of the Worlds came after 1951. So I would say, in fact, I even did on the webmatrix.net, I kind of did a timeline of all the extraterrestrial movies, that were the big box office hits that everybody knows about. Just looking at what is it that they want our subconscious to perceive about extraterrestrials, and all these evil aliens coming down and destroying and killing us, and all this is created from ever since the day the Earth stood still, which was actually a fairly positive movie, where the extraterrestrials are warning that if we don't do away with our nuclear weapons, that the Earth of ours will be reduced to a burned out cinder, as well as all the movies have most of them, just about every which way you can, deliver an evil alien. They want to come here and kill us all and destroy us. And the report from Iron Mountain, which leaked, which LBJ hit the roof and suppressed it for all time, said that they planned on having a contrived threat from outer space. And, von Braun, when he died, in, I think it was 76, somewhere in the 70s, and he's 71 maybe, on his deathbed, he said they let him in. If anybody would have been brought in on the secret government plans for the future for their false flags, he first said, there's going to be, first would be the Soviets. And we know that was a lie, because the Soviets were giving false intelligence to Truman and escalated the CIA, put all these Nazi spies, and rewrote the paperwork for thousands of them, which went out through Argentina and all abouts. And then after the Soviets would be rogue nations, and then there was terrorists. And we know about terrorists, and 9/11 would be the other false flag. And then he mentioned about asteroids, and he said the final one, the last card, as he put it, would be the extraterrestrial threat, where it would be a hoaxed alien invasion. We'd be thinking we would have to build this multi-trillion-dollar system against these evil aliens, but actually it's all part of the Unite the World, as Clinton revealed back in the beginning of 2015 when he was on what's his name? I can't think of his name. Anyway, one of the famous talk shows. Jimmy Kimmel. There we go. He said that, I sent my aides down there, and there was no aliens or anything. Well, we know that wasn't true, because Clinton, as Lawrence Rockefeller, wanted to release the information. He was a little different than the rest of the Rockefellers. And so he sent a CIA director, which that got Dr. Greer involved. And the CIA, ever since Nelson Rockefeller restructured the whole CIA and MJ-12 at the request of Eisenhower back in the 50s, we lost jurisdiction by our legal constitutional government. And ever since then, ever since they murdered Kennedy, no CIA director, no head of intelligence, no anybody who you would think should have, or presidents for that matter, have access because they have gained complete control of the whole system. And that's what got the Disclosure Project that I got involved with started, because the CIA director says, I know the subject's real. I'm trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. So then we started collecting back in '93, the 500 and some witnesses, of which 21 were crazy enough to go in front of the cameras of the major, television networks of the world, and disclose this stuff. But, I watched, as an ex-ABC newsman myself, not a big anchor person on a television network or anything, but I used to rip off the teletypes of AP and UPI and read the news reports. But now I find after that little experience I had with CBS not allowing me to say that we have the scientists that can offer a solution to the world, I find that the Tavistock Institute, with billions of dollars of think tanks working in conjunction with the CIA in order to control the media and the highest levels of distribution. And that became even more aware when I traveled across the United States. Since it wasn't being done on the mainstream media, we figured, well, we'll go to every single major city, right? And rent these huge halls. And we had a executive briefing video that was boiled down from 200 hours of witness testimonies down to 2 hours, and we had standing ovations. I traveled I was in Boulder, Colorado, San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Portland, all over the major Western, and Dr. Greer did the rest of the East Coast. Every single time, the network affiliates, ABC, NBC, CBS, all of them, they would come in with all the cameras. They would interview, and without exception, they would throw the giggle factor out and make fun of it. In fact, we were even told in San Francisco that they were told to make fun of it, because when they came out, they said, "Oh, the Disclosure Project's looking to aliens to solve the world's energy problems." That type of thing. So they effectively control the perception through the giggle factor, because people have been falsely indoctrinated through, the Rockefeller Foundation in 1946 rewrote the entire history of what happened in World War II for all future generations of school children to read about what happened, hiding what really happened with the Nazis and the occult and everything like that. And then, 1950, Dulles started Operation Mockingbird, which now we have, non-official cover journalists that are actually working for the CIA, that the CIA gives them the scripts so that it would fit their agenda. And in the entertainment industry, well, they have their connections there as well. So
they're painting the scenery. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying they're painting the scenery. That's the bottom line. They're orchestrating the entire agenda and then the script.
It worked perfectly. The plan, Welkenschallen's Creed, worldview warfare, was to create this matrix of perception that would indoctrinate one generation after another generation. Remember, Hitler said, "Give me a child up to 7 years old and he's mine forever." Well, you can imagine so many generations have been falsely indoctrinated. When I was a little kid in the 50s, loving these science fiction movies and these flying saucers and, Forbidden Planet and The Day the Earth Stood Still. And it totally stimulated imagination, But then all of a sudden imagination turned into reality. Such a different reality is really going on that it's kind of interesting that just last I think it was September in 2015, one of the George H.W. Bush was trying to support his his son Jeb Bush, and somebody out of the audience asked him, "When are you going to release the information about the UFOs?" And George H.W. Bush, he's like 91. He says, "Americans handle the truth." So probably the way everybody has been indoctrinated, thinking like a lot of this stuff is science fiction. It might be partially true for a lot of the indoctrinated population.
Right. Well, it's an entrainment program, as you were touching on it earlier. It's all about, you go to school and you get trained and you get educated with the wrong information, and people get programmed and to some degree slept. I mean, they're sleepwalking. They're not really fully awakened to what's really going on a multidimensional scale. You know what else comes to mind is this idea of the quote-unquote ET, which is really, when you think about us and our generations and all the experiments that have been running rampant underground, it comes to mind that we're hybrids to begin with. I'm a firm believer that we're all star beings. So we already have the quote-unquote alien DNA. I'm a firm believer in that. And I think that people will discover this down the road. But simply stated, we've been working on this technology. It's been covert for many, many decades. And our ancestors were involved. And then think about beforehand, where we had early sightings before we even had computers, right? And recorded visitors.
Oh, yeah. And you can imagine... and the people who do these reports on these sightings. I mean, I've had them fly 100 feet over my head. I've seen them a number of times. I used to think people were making it up. Oh, they just want to be special. Oh, I saw a UFO and this and like that. I thought people were making up the stories until I had one fly right over my head. Whether it was made in USA or somewhere else, I don't know. But you can imagine, I never reported anything. You can imagine so many people out there, they're not going to take time to go online and report what they saw. And so you can imagine it's probably about, conservatively, 10 times more than that actually being witnessed by people all over the planet of terrestrial and non-terrestrial. Probably most of them are terrestrial.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking a lot of it's black technology programs. And also, I don't discount holographic projection systems being used because of some of the things that are going on where some people see things that look like they're almost like holographic lights in the sky. They really don't have a solid look to them. So that's another thing that comes to mind.
I think you and I do this stuff, go on talk shows and stuff because it really pisses us off because we don't like being lied to.
Yep, I know.
I don't like being deceived. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of listeners out there feel the same way. If you don't think this stuff is real, like most of the people are, listening to this show, they're pretty clued in. They've done some research and know, the validity of what we're talking about. But for the average person that watches CNN, and just trying to make a living, just trying to survive on the way this planet's being run, they don't really have time. This is a luxury to sit down and really research testimonies and documents and try to put the dots together to see what is this false perception matrix that apparently the Nazis so effectively, infiltrated and expanded upon, through, and it's so polished. You watch the news and everything. It's very polished. How they have the psychology and how what they used to call the engineering of consent, so that people would be watching the evening news and from what they're saying and the views that they're giving and the way they're doing it, naturally they know exactly, to a fine science, exactly what the person's perception and conclusion is going to be by watching that information exactly the way they presented it. And it's a fine science. They spend billions of our taxpayer money in doing this with the think tanks, and they're also spending billions of our taxpayers' money on legally spreading disinformation through the alternative media of the internet.
Damage control. Yeah, they're doing a lot of damage control. Yeah, it's interesting. They are masters of mind control. There's no doubt about that, with the psychological warfare. And now they have the artificial intelligence program. So, and you're talking about the think tanks. I mean, they're using array systems now. They can induct a contactee and turn it into a me lab, and experiment on this person and get all these templates of data, and then interface it onto the AI, and then have your database right there. So, yeah, they're doing some things that are just phenomenally incredible right now and very insidious. Yeah,
you have to wonder, with all these underground bases, and And, there's few witnesses that live, like Phil Schneider was one of them, where they were digging under and they happened to break through an alien facility that was there, and he lost his fingers and and eventually he got suicided up in, I think it was Washington.
What's your take on him? Do you think he was legit?
Well, he's got this big cut hole in his chest, and he's got these fingers missing, and, I mean, he's not the only one talking about it. If he was the only one talking about it, I'd say, why does this guy want to get recognition going to these UFO conferences talking about this stuff with a couple of fingers saying, oh, an alien shot this off and all this stuff? And then why would he mysteriously, die?
He was taken out for sure. Sounds like it anyway.
Yeah. So you have to wonder. These facilities are huge. There's this one doctor put out this book about the what's the government hiding. The underground bases and everything that they have. And they're huge. They're like gigantic, and they've got the technology. They got these huge boring things that turn the whole thing into like a hardened glass rock that makes these things. And back in the I think it was like in the 80s, I was doing some work with Marcel Vogel, and Jim Delatoso was working on the Myers case, and I actually handled some of the samples that Billy Myers was given from the Palladians. They were looking at an electron microscope and analyzing, and it's not of this world. He was researching the Taos hum, if you remember that. There was this everybody was complaining that there's this hum going on under the ground, and nobody could figure out what was causing this hum. Well, I wonder what that could be. And in 1993, I met with Bob Lazar and filmed his first. It was not supposed to be done. Nobody's supposed to record it, but I did anyway. I put it up on the webmatrix.net. His first public appearance and John Lear was there. And on the way there, I was heading up through Dulce, New Mexico, and I stopped and get some gas, and I talked to the gas station attendant. I said, "You ever seen anything strange?" He said, "Yeah, just over here on the hill. We just had another cattle mutilation. You got all these cows that a whole bunch of them disappear at once." I think Linda Morton Howe's like the expert on all this, not me. Mm-hmm. But surgically removed, no tracks coming in, no footprints. All these cows just disappear, or all the blood removed and everything, all around where Phil Snyder said there's a Dulce base there which is kind of a joint alien and military operation, where some of the levels are, Mm-hmm. So, it makes you wonder. My friend who I used to work with the detective agency in San Diego, Monique Lassan, she's helps rescuing children around the planet. She's a detective. She just recently did a conference and talks about, like hundreds of thousands of children every year go missing. We're not a trace, no clues, nothing. Just hundreds of thousands of people missing. You have to wonder, where are they going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, obviously underground trafficking in some form or another, or experimentation. I don't discount that either. And it's interesting when you talk about the underground bases because, they're all supposedly interconnected across the globe. So we're not just talking here in America. We're talking all across the world. These things are supposedly interconnected.
Right, those maglev trains that go like Mach 2 or something, I don't know, super fast, from one place to another, and they're all interconnected. You're right, and a lot of them are under or near, military bases, and this whole thing started, the whole underground base thing, just kind of catching my interest more and more, studying what in Nazi Germany, in 1943 when they were worried the Allies are going to start doing aerial reconnaissance and start bombing all. Hitler had his mansions along with all his elite in this little valley that they had. And so they started building all these underground facilities, and then they started building this huge underground facility where they had all their operations, and they took concentration camp laborers to do all the work underneath. Well, like 320,000 of them died under there on these, really horrible conditions, slaving away, making the V2 rocket and all these other things. Mm-hmm. So you need a lot to do all this work. I'm sure a lot of them don't want to do the work themselves, and it seems like that's the Nazi mentality, just expendable people, use them for slaves. So,
well, that's what they've been doing here. I mean, all over the world, that's why people work in the illusion, right? They're slave labor is the word I want to say. I was going to ask you about the underground tunnels. I've heard that there are stories that they actually were original caves that were there that were actually enhanced by these covert companies, covert corporations, what do you want to call them, undergrounds. Do you have any insight on that? Like original places, original areas where perhaps a different species created a different underground?
I don't have any direct information on that.
Okay, just curious.
I know that, Eisenhower was aware that, when he lost control, it was going into the hands of the corporations. And the corporations tied in with the banking elite, tied in with the Nazi cabal, you could call them that, whatever names you want to call. Basically took control, in Operation Eagle Flight. They discovered the King Solomon's treasure in the south of France. It was huge, with not only a huge amount of wealth of gold and everything that they had, but incredible wealth of occult knowledge, coming out of the secret mystery schools of ancient Egypt. But all that was an Operation Eagle Flight, which went into Martin Bormann controlled that. Of course, he had lots of friends in the United States that were working with him, and so they bought 750 front corporations. And you have to wonder how many household names that we have for corporations originally were seeded with that. That's a whole subject of study in itself. But apparently, the corporate world has been heavily infiltrated, you could say, with the agenda that is being controlled by a few people at the top that are aware of what their goals and agenda are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a weaponization of whatever artifacts they've acquired, a reverse engineered technology to some degree. If you talk to Colonel Aquino, Michael Aquino, for example, he's written the book Mind Wars, which is about mind control and actually enhancing the psychotronics incorporated into artificial intelligence to attack and manipulate brainwaves, right? So I'm very familiar with that technology. So I'll tell you point blank, this is something that it's always about occultism, weaponizing mystery school teachings, and almost contorting it in such a twisted fabric so that people get kind of spooked by the occult now. Instead of understanding what it is on a higher level of alchemy, like you and I do, they get concerned because of the misuse of what's happened. The misuse of technology and also information.
Yeah, well, the most important thing, and this goes all the way back to the Bavarian Illuminati back in 1776 when Rothschild, basically wrote out the plan for that. Their plan was to do exactly what's going on in the world today. We have people fighting against each other, but the main thing was to control the press, to control the perception, and that was the whole fallback plan for the Nazis, is controlling the perception matrix. Because, see, if everybody started to become aware of the things that you and I are aware of, and many people are becoming aware of as you start to research and connect the dots, and you start to go, oh my God, there's something to this. Oh my God, it's like you keep on seeing all the connections based on not somebody just pulled something out of thin air, but based on credible evidence and things that you can follow up on that piece together. My mother from Argentina, there used to be an old saying, they used to say, the devil always forgets to put the lid back on the cookie jar. And there's so many cookie jar lids all over the place. When you start to put them together, they start to put a mosaic together that makes it pretty clear that there is a breakaway civilization that is operating a secret space program that Nazis may have already colonized, put a base on a lunar base, and then expanded the operations to Mars because, back in 1967, before we even went to the moon, one of the witnesses that joined me in Washington, Dr. Carl Wolf, he was at a, NSA facility, he said. I'm not sure if he misunderstood it was a NASA facility, but he said NSA, but you have to wonder how long the NSA has been involved in all this, that he saw the bases on the dark side, on the lunar orbiter. They perfectly clear pictures of domes, towers, mushroom-shaped buildings, an entire structure going on. They had scientists from all over the world there, he said. I was going to work in Antarctica for the National Science Foundation. I answered an ad. They needed somebody to operate their communications to the supply ship going back and forth, and they needed somebody with. I had all the highest class radio. I had a first class commercial, extra class amateur. I knew how to repair teletypes. I graduated at the top of the class, so I way exceeded all of their requirements and stuff. And they had scientists from all over the world in Antarctica that were studying penguins to see how they can take the blood of the penguin and use it for military purposes so that military could operate in extreme cold like that. But I didn't take the job, but you have to wonder because according to the Soviet reports, most of the personnel then in Antarctica are from the intelligence community, CIA, NSA. So, you got to wonder if the base is still functional down there. It'd be curious, wouldn't it? I could see a day in the future where they're having tours of, here is the from 1938 to 1943. Here's the Nazi base that was built on the Antarctic, and here's some of the old Reich saucers and stuff like that. Maybe in the future we'll have tourist tours. Going.
Well, I think that you can visit that base in Antarctica.
It would be fun, yeah.
I think Stuart Swerdlow was out there. I interviewed him not too long ago, and he's mentioned something about it. So I think you can actually get out there. Well, he has a special access, I think. But I do believe you can access some kind of a base there, some kind of a military facility, if I'm not mistaken. So, but, what comes to mind when you're talking about those penguins is a nanosuit.
Oh, say that again?
A nanosuit. That's what comes to mind when you're talking about the penguins and the experimentation with a possible, kind of like a calibration to cold temperatures. I'm thinking nanotechnology,
Oh, yeah. Dr. Greer was telling me about the programmed life forms where they have these, you have to wonder, the cow's blood in which they take all the blood out of the cow completely, not a drop of blood, and predators won't touch the animal once it's been done. It's very similar to human blood, and that they actually have it has some type of microchip or something like where they can program these life forms and do what they call stagecraft, where the average person with this thing coming down and everything, with all the mind control stuff that they have now, the average person would think they're actually being abducted by extraterrestrials, where it's actually a MILAB,
exactly.
military abduction.
I think more and more people who say that they have ET contact is actually I think they're being pulled into the underground. I really do. I think it's all experimentation because that psychotronic driving system, that can create all sorts of hallucinations and visuals with extraterrestrials, and they wouldn't know the difference unless they're really enhanced in their own psychic ability. So, I know that technology really well. I'm telling you, man, they're capable of pulling anything off. It's quite amazing and very disturbing at the same time. It really is.
Amazing and disturbing at the same time. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. When you mentioned the domes on the dark side of the moon, are you saying covert space program, or are you saying maybe an off-world species that already established those domes?
Well, let's say there was in 1960, I think it was around 1967, they were doing the lunar orbiter. They were making a mosaic of the whole of the other side of the moon that faces away from us that we can never see with our telescopes.
You mean the other side that's like the Death Star? Right?
Yeah,
I laugh.
We can never see that, Right. So there was a base there already. So we know that Colonel Corso, who was involved in the distribution of the reverse engineering of the extraterrestrial craft into the corporations and stuff like that. They were planning on doing a moon thing. But there's different stories about the whole moon thing, that we were warned off the moon and all that, and that's why we haven't gone. Mysteriously, we went to the moon, in 1969, and we. That was the 1969. It's interesting. That's when I got the report from the extraterrestrial craft, or supposedly extraterrestrial, right? It could have been, the Fourth Reich, coming out of the ocean.
That's really interesting.
I remember going into the blockhouse, a highly secured area, and they had a little lounge and watching the astronauts bouncing around on the moon, which was, it appears to be part of it was a drop-in video feed, because they couldn't show all of it. But anyway, I think we went to the moon. I just think that not all of it was just like one of the cameras went out, and the camera went out. We lost audio for about a minute and a half or whatever, but ham radio operators were picking it up because they had the pointer antennas. It's a highly directional operating on a high-frequency band. They had the pointer antennas at the moon. So I don't think they were going in lower Earth orbit, like some claim that we really never went to the moon. And they were picking it up, and then, according, it was Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. They were saying, oh, my God, these babies are huge. They're menacing. And, my God, it's like, so...
Weren't they using the word Santa Claus or something for a code name for that type of thing?
Yeah, they got all kinds of code names. But
I think that's interesting. Well, there's... Oh, go ahead.
That's why we haven't been back to the moon.
Yeah, well, there's also that theory that the moon was towed into orbit and that it doesn't necessarily belong there. It was actually, some say it was self-driven. In other words, it has its own mechanisms to drive. And, of course, and then there's another theory that it was towed in to orbit. And it wasn't here originally. It's not supposed to be there. So there's a lot of things that kind of get spun around. And when you look at the illusion of history, his story, her story, a story, we really don't know the history of the world and the illusion of. We really don't have all the data because most of it's been edited and censored, wiped out. And so we're trying to put everything together piece by piece,
Totally. Yeah, one of our witnesses was talking about they were filming this nuclear missile they were sending up. They wanted to detonate it on the moon. And as it was coming up, a UFO comes in, circles around it, sends a plasma beam. The warhead goes off, and it flies off. And the CIA comes in, and he says, "Well, you're sworn to a security oath." And they cut that part of the film out. And and the same thing happened with what was his other name? The other astronaut. Oh God!
Buzz Aldrin.
Buzz Aldrin, not Buzz Aldrin, but
Armstrong.
Not Neil Armstrong. Anyway, he was there in 1957 at the
Edgar Mitchell. No.
Not Edgar Mitchell, although Edgar Mitchell's been very vocal also. But there was a craft landed over in New Mexico, one of the bases, and the CIA came in and confiscated the film there as well. So the CIA has been very instrumental working with MJ-12, or the new one that was created by a secret executive order during the Eisenhower administration, where they put Alan Dulles as MJ-1, and Alan Dulles was the one that set up the assassination directive for JFK, which was in the Byrne memo. Then they were burning all the that was a job I had to do. I had to burn all these top secret documents and stuff when I was in the Navy. They snatched it out of the fire, and basically it was an assassination directive to kill Kennedy, 10 days before he was assassinated. He wanted to share the information with the Soviets and release the the UFO files, but that's what happened
there. And Dan, we're going to head for a break. Everybody, please stay tuned. We're here at PSN Radio, and this is Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven. Be right back.